Some attempting to register had even been murdered to stop black political activity. And the state passed new voting laws to make registration more difficult.
On this side, right here you interpret, in other words, you tell what it means. Just write your meaning, your understanding of it.
Registering to vote at that time meant that you filled out a 22-question questionnaire. One of the questions was, interpret any of the 286 sections of the Mississippi Constitution to the satisfaction of the registrar. Now, you have to bear in mind that some of those registrars couldn't read or write, but that didn't matter. They could still determine who should be registered if that person happened to be black, because all whites who attempted to register were registered.
As the struggle for voting rights escalated in the Delta, tension was building in Jackson, the state capital, and the last stop of the Freedom Rides in 1961. A leader in Jackson and throughout the state was Medgar Evers, NAACP State Field Secretary. Evers had supported James Meredith during the battle to integrate the University of Mississippi. For 10 years, he had traveled the state, fighting for racial justice, and now helped organize the NAACP boycott of downtown stores.
Don't shop for anything on Capitol Street. Let's let the merchants down on Capitol Street feel the economic pinch. Let me say this to you. I had one merchant to call me, and he said, I want you to know that I've talked to my national office today, and they want me to tell you that we don't need nigger business. These are stores that help to support the White Citizens Council, the council that is dedicated to keeping you and I second-class citizens. Now, finally, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be demonstrating here until freedom comes to Negroes here in Jackson, Mississippi.
In June 1963, students in Jackson poured out of their schools to protest the beatings and arrest of demonstrators in downtown sit-ins. In response, Jackson officials put police and firemen on 24-hour alert, with orders to contain the demonstrators.
Loud! Loud! Did you hear me?
Hundreds were arrested. Mayor Allen Thompson announced that Jackson could handle 10,000 if necessary. The attitude of Jackson city officials was another reminder that blacks in Mississippi would have no real power until they had the power to elect those who governed them.
If you are not a registered voter, remember this one thing, that Allen Thompson got in the mayor's office by the majority of the folk who were qualified to vote and voted on the day that he was elected. Ross Barnett got in office because he was elected by the majority of the folk who were qualified to vote and voted on the day that he was elected. And if you don't like this thing, let's get ready to change it.
Demonstrators were not backing down, and many were being injured. For Medgar Evers, the situation grew more dangerous with every passing day.
It was simply in the air. You knew that something was going to happen, and the logical person for it to happen to was Medgar. It certainly brought us closer during that time. As a matter of fact, we didn't talk. We didn't have to. We communicated without words. It was a touch, it was a look, it was holding each other, it was music playing, and I used to try to reassure him and tell him, nothing's going to happen to you. The FBI is here. Laugh. Everybody knows you. You're in the press. They wouldn't dare do anything to you.
On June 11, 1963, Myrlie Evers watched at home as President John Kennedy made his strongest speech on civil rights.
It is not enough to pin the blame on others, to say this is a problem of one section of the country or another, or to deplore the facts that we face. A great change is at hand, and our task, our obligation, is to make that revolution, that change, peaceful and constructive for all. Those who do nothing are inviting shame as well as violence. Those who act boldly are recognizing right as well as reality.
Late that night he came home. The children were still up. I was asleep across the bed, and we heard the motor of the car coming in and pulling into the driveway. We heard him get out of the car and the car door slam, and in that same instance we heard the loud gunfire. The children fell to the floor as he had taught them to do. I made a run for the front door, turned on the light, and there he was. The force of the bullet had pushed him forward, as I understand, and the strong man that he was, he had his keys in his hand and had pulled his body around the rest of the way to the door. There he lay, and I screamed, and people came out. Next door neighbor fired a gun, as he said, to try to frighten anyone away. And I knew then that that was it.
Medgar Evers had been shot in the back by a single round from a high-powered rifle. The one fingerprint found on the weapon belonged to Byron de la Beckwith, a member of the Citizens Council in Greenwood, Mississippi. Medgar Evers, 37 years old, died 1 hour later.
When Medgar was felled by that shot, and I rushed out and saw him lying there, and people from the neighborhood began to gather, there were also some whose color happened to have been white. I don't think I have ever hated as much in my life as I did at that particular moment with anyone who had white skin. I screamed at the neighbors, and when the police finally got there, I told them that they had killed Medgar. And I can recall wanting so much to have a machine gun or something in my hands and just stand there and mow them all down. I can't explain the depth of my hatred at that point.
We view this as a cold, brutal, deliberate killing in a savage, uncivilized state. The most savage, the most uncivilized state in the entire 50 states. There is no state with a record that approaches that of Mississippi in inhumanity, murder, brutality, and racial hatred. It is absolutely at the bottom of the list.
In Jackson, Mississippi, in 1963, there lived a man who was great. He fought for freedom all of his life, but they laid Medgar Evers in his grave.
On the day that Medgar was funeral, I mean, there was violence. I mean, there was no way to predict it. There was a different element of people who had never participated in the movement before. The guys off the street who were just angry, you know, at that time is we had very little contact with in the Jackson area. We had mostly worked in through churches. We had worked through students, young people, and then just people in general, you know. The street people we had not really worked with as well because they didn't want to have anything to do with it because they always felt that they could not cope with the nonviolence. Not that they disagreed with what the movement, it's just that the tactics that were used. You know, on that particular day, that group of people decided to speak out. The police department and others came there. They actually antagonized the people. They were there in full battalion gear with the riot arm on and guns, and they were being pretty rough with the people on the street. And the people just said, we're not going to take that. This is a funeral of our leader, and here they are, you know, harassing us, and the white folk killed them.
Shots had already been fired when John Doerr, a Justice Department attorney, stepped between the crowds and the police. With the help of Dave Dennis and others, Doerr convinced both sides to back off. The demonstrators went home. Medgar Evers was buried in Arlington Cemetery with full military honors. No one was ever convicted of his murder.